In March 2026, inside NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., that word appeared on a screen behind Administrator Jared Isaacman. It was simple, almost understated. But what it represented was anything but small. It was a declaration that something fundamental had changed, not just in NASA's plans, but in its identity. For decades, NASA had been drifting, caught between ambition and hesitation, trying to satisfy politics, budgets, and expectations all at once. The result was a space agency that talked big but moved slowly. Missions were delayed. Costs spiraled. Momentum faded. But now, something was different. Because this time, NASA wasn't just talking about going back to the moon. It was talking about staying. And more importantly, it was talking about winning. For the first time in generations, space was no longer just about exploration. It was about competition. A silent, high-stakes race was unfolding beyond Earth's atmosphere, one that would determine who controls the future of space. And at the center of it all was the moon. Not as a destination, but as a foothold. Isaacman didn't sugarcoat the past. He openly admitted what many had suspected for years: NASA had been spread too thin. It had tried to be everything to everyone, and in doing so, it had achieved far less than it could have. Billions of dollars had been spent, but progress had been painfully slow. Plans had been made, revised, delayed, and sometimes quietly abandoned. But now, the stakes were different. Because this wasn't just about lost time or wasted money anymore. It was about losing the future. There was another player in this race, one moving fast, focused, and determined. China. And unlike the space race of the 1960s, this wasn't about planting a flag and leaving footprints in lunar dust. This time, the goal was permanence. Infrastructure. Dominance. A presence that wouldn't leave. And NASA knew that if it didn't change, really change, it would fall behind. So it did something bold. It tore up its own plan. For years, the Artemis Program had been NASA's roadmap back to the moon. But that roadmap had a problem. It was too ambitious in the wrong places, and too risky where it mattered most. The original plan for Artemis 3 called for astronauts to land on the moon using systems that hadn't even been fully tested together. It was a leap that looked impressive on paper, but in reality, it was a gamble that could have ended in failure. So NASA made a decision that surprised many. There would be no moon landing in Artemis 3. Instead, the mission would become something far more important: a full-scale rehearsal in low Earth orbit. A test of everything that needed to work before humanity could safely return to the lunar surface. The Orion spacecraft would rendezvous with a lunar lander. Astronauts would transfer between vehicles. Systems would be tested under real conditions. It wasn't flashy, but it was smart. Because for the first time in years, NASA wasn't chasing headlines. It was building a foundation. And that foundation came with another major shift: competition. For a long time, it was assumed that one company would dominate NASA's return to the moon. But under the new strategy, nothing was guaranteed. SpaceX was no longer the only player. Blue Origin was back in the race. And suddenly, the message was clear. Contracts didn't matter. Promises didn't matter. Only results mattered. Whoever could deliver a working system first would win. And that sense of urgency changed everything. Deadlines that once drifted endlessly were now locked in. Artemis 3 was set for 2027. Artemis 4 would follow quickly after, bringing astronauts back to the moon, this time for real. And by the end of 2028, NASA wasn't planning just one landing. It was planning multiple. A rhythm. A cadence. A return to the kind of rapid progress that defined the Apollo era. Back then, the gap between Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 was just 4 months. Today, NASA wanted to recapture that momentum, not as nostalgia, but as necessity. Because speed mattered. Consistency mattered. And most of all, presence mattered. But landing on the moon was only the beginning. The real goal was something far bigger. A permanent base. A foothold that would transform the moon from a distant object in the sky into a working environment. A place where humans didn't just visit, but lived. The plan to build that base would unfold over 3 phases, each more ambitious than the last. Phase 1 would focus on access, getting to the moon reliably and frequently. Dozens of missions would be launched in just a few years. Most of them robotic. Some crewed. All of them designed to test technologies, gather data, and prepare for what came next. One of the biggest challenges was something simple, yet brutal. Darkness. On the moon, night doesn't last hours. It lasts weeks. Temperatures plummet to levels that can freeze machinery solid. Electronics fail. Systems shut down. Survival becomes a challenge even for robots. So NASA turned to a solution that sounded almost like science fiction. Nuclear power. Small, compact systems that could generate heat and electricity, keeping equipment alive through the long, freezing nights. It wasn't just an option. It was a necessity. At the same time, new technologies were being introduced, machines designed to explore places humans couldn't easily reach. Rocket-powered drones capable of hopping across the lunar surface. Rovers that could travel hundreds of kilometers. Satellites that would provide constant communication and live data back to Earth. And for the first time, much of it would be visible to the public in real time. The moon wouldn't just be explored. It would be watched. By millions. Because NASA understood something it had forgotten for a long time. Inspiration matters. Phase 2 would take things further. This was where construction began. Infrastructure would be delivered piece by piece, habitats, power systems, vehicles capable of digging, building, and shaping the lunar surface. The moon would begin to change, not naturally, but intentionally. Human presence would extend. Missions would last longer. Systems would become more complex. And slowly, almost quietly, a base would start to form. Then came Phase 3. The moment everything had been leading toward. Permanent habitation. Astronauts wouldn't just visit anymore. They would stay. Rotating crews would live on the moon for weeks at a time, working, experimenting, building. The base would grow into something resembling a small outpost. Connected modules, powered systems, life support infrastructure. A place that could sustain life. But even that wasn't the end of the vision. Because the moon wasn't just a destination. It was a proving ground. A place to test technologies that would one day go further, to Mars, and beyond. A place to learn how to live off-world. How to use local resources. How to turn dust into building material. Ice into water. Water into fuel. It was about survival. And expansion. And perhaps most importantly, it was about belief. Because deep down, NASA knew something that went beyond engineering or strategy. The real mission wasn't just to build a base. It was to inspire a generation. To show young people that impossible things could still be attempted and achieved. That the future wasn't something to wait for, but something to build. For years, that sense of inspiration had faded. Space had become routine. Predictable. Distant. But now, it was changing again. Because when you watch a rocket rise into the sky, carrying humans to another world, something shifts. You start to believe. And that belief spreads. From classrooms to laboratories. From dreams to reality. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. NASA itself admitted that much. The challenges were immense. The risks were real. The timeline was aggressive. But that was the point. Because history doesn't remember safe plans. It remembers bold ones. And this was bold. As the new era of space exploration begins, one question remains. Will NASA succeed in building a permanent presence on the moon, or will the competition reach it first? And more importantly, what does it mean for all of us if they do? If humanity truly becomes a multiplanetary species, are we ready for what comes next? Let me know what you think. And if you want to see more deep dives like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the journey.